I think it's a confusing message to have the Prime Minister saying that kids should go back to school at the same time the Education Minister said that he hasn't decided whether his kids will go back yet?
Well, good morning, Annalise. What we do need to make sure we do in this situation is have consistency, not just between federal ministers, but also between the federal government and the state governments. These are decisions that need to be taken very carefully. We have an arrangement with the National Cabinet set up to do that, although I would indicate that I think we need some more transparency around some of the discussion that takes place in relation to this very important issue. What we don't need is division across the political spectrum, because that undermines confidence.
But just on this point, shouldn't Australians be able to expect that the government's practicing what they preach and get a clear answer from the Education Minister whether his children will be returning to school, as is the government advice, or not?
I think it's absolutely essential that we get clear answers from governments, and obviously the choices that Dan Tehan makes are of course interesting, because he will be fully informed by everything that takes place in the cabinet room. We just don't need to have state governments saying one thing and the federal government saying something different, or indeed ministers across government saying different things.
Now, Rex Patrick, you're among a number of people who've recovered from coronavirus. You've put yourself up as a volunteer for future research.
Yes, I had the pleasure yesterday of donating some blood to SA Pathology, who obviously want to look at my blood as well as other COVID-19 survivors to help with medical research, and that's a good thing. But I also think we need to start thinking about how we utilise people who have been through the virus and have come out the other side with the ability to integrate and work inside the community more so than others.
And you've also experienced yourself some of the issues with people who've come out the other side of coronavirus, and some pretty unclear directions on what kind of self-isolation you have to adhere to. What was your experience with that?
Well, my experience was I came out of self-isolation having recovered from COVID-19, attended Parliament to assist in the passing of the $130 billion JobKeeper package. But on returning to South Australia, the generic rule is that you have to go into self-isolation. I actually contacted the Chief Public Health Officer here in South Australia, and indeed the State Coordinator, who is the Police Commissioner, and just raised the issue that many people who have recovered don't present the same risk as someone who hasn't had the virus. So in my circumstances, I have been given an exemption from self-isolation, but it's not about me being a senator. I am someone who has passed through the virus, come out the other side, and I think we really do need to start addressing how we utilise those people. For example, in relation to schools, perhaps given the choice of putting a teacher in a classroom and having a teacher develop online material, someone who's had COVID-19 may be the better choice for the first option. We might see situations in Tasmania where groups are self-isolating as a result of COVID-19, but if there are people who have already been infected, that may not be necessary. They may simply be able to continue their work.
And we've had the US President today say that they're going to pull funding from the World Health Organization because of their response to coronavirus. We're hearing mixed opinions from Australian MPs. Do you think this is something Australia should consider?
Well, I think what's happened with Donald Trump is he's trying to distract from his own mismanagement of this crisis. The last thing you want to do in the midst of a global pandemic is try and disrupt or shut down an organisation that has deep-seated roots inside most countries. We need to be building cooperation around the globe and to try and replicate the functions, the very good functions that the WHO performs is a ludicrous suggestion. Now, having said that, I have been critical at the start as to how long it took for the WHO to declare an emergency of international significance. There is proper, it would be proper to go and examine what's happened in relation to their performance throughout COVID-19 to seek to get corrections, to get better processes, but to pull funding from this organisation at this time is just absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Would you support Dave Sharma's idea that that funding should be conditional on those reforms if we go back and look at some of the processes that have gone wrong, like you said?
Well, I don't think we need to make our funding conditional at this stage. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. We have Australian doctors relying on the advice of the WHO. We have the WHO assisting in places like Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, the South Pacific. We can have a look at reform and changes where things have gone wrong, but to do that right now, I think, is most inappropriate.